Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this webinar with Soil. My name is Neetika Batra. I chair the business leadership program here, and I also teach the finance subjects, which includes accounts, corporate finance, M&As, project finance, and many other all kinds of finance subjects. So basically, I think today we are going to talk about fundraising by corporates. That's the topic that has been assigned for the evening. And what we can do is I can start putting things into a framework for 15-20 minutes and then welcome you to ask any questions that you may have on the topic. The time given obviously is a bit short for covering everything related to this topic. It's not possible to cover in depth the entire range, but I'll try and give you some broad overview of how it goes. So when we say fundraising by companies, obviously you all understand it means raising of money, raising of funds from the market by the companies. Why do companies need funds? We all know that to finance their projects, to finance their growth. To grow, they need to be able to either set up their own factories, projects, buy new plant and machinery, new real assets for which they need money, or they can grow inorganically, as they call, by acquiring other companies which are already there in the field, right? Again, for that you need money to pay to those companies who you are buying from. Where to raise this money from? Various sources. The instruments, first of all, various options. The company can either go for equity or go for debt. Equity is the ownership capital, we all know that. Debt, as the name goes, is loans, borrowings, right? So you may be able to borrow money from any source, may it be banks, may it be other companies, it could be the capital markets, it could be any other investors who are willing to lend the money to the company. When we talk about equity, likely enough, again, similar sources. It could be institution giving the equity to the company, or it could be the investors from the capital market subscribing to the equity share capital of this particular company. So the venues could be many. The traditional sources have been the capital markets. You might have heard of public issue, private placements, IPOs, FPOs, GDRs. These are some of the terms we use when we try and raise money from the market. So broadly speaking, we can say you can either go public to raise money, approach the public at large to raise the money, or you can do it through a private placement, which means that you can privately approach some investors, big time investors, who can privately pass on the money to the company. When we talk about public raising of money, it is from the capital markets, obviously. The route can be an IPO or an FPO. IPO, you all know the full form, initial public offer. FPO, a follow-on public offer or a secondary public offer. IPO, as the name goes, is the initial public offer, which means when an unlisted company is going for the first time to the market to raise money, converts itself from an unlisted to a listed company. Once you're already a listed company, you can approach the capital market any number of times after that. SEBI permits you to do that. SEBI even permits you to price your issues freely, as long as the market is happy giving money to you. And of course, the companies are very, very careful about the market price of their shares, because that's the benchmark of their performance against which investors judge their performance, their growth, and also to some extent it means their raising money from the capital markets in future is governed by the kind of gains they have passed on to the investors in the past. So that becomes a benchmark there. Then of course you have private placement, which can be in many forms. Can be a preferential allotment, can be a plain vanilla private placement, can be a qualified institutional placement, as they call it, QIP as you call it, which means that you are not approaching the public at large, you are not going in for a public issue, but you are approaching a few select investors, wholesale investors as we call them. Could be banks, could be institutions, mutual funds, FIs, developmental institutions. These kind of select big time wholesale investors are called qualified institutional buyers, and an issue with these kind of buyers by the company is called a qualified institutional placement. That's a QIP, which is obviously a smaller version, a more limited version of a public issue. Which means lesser formalities for the company. You don't have to approach lakhs of investors. You just approach those 20-30 people in the market, the investors. So it's more time, it's more cost effective. It is easy on the time, it's easy on the money, efforts, and so many other things. But obviously this does not guarantee you listing. Right? And of course the institutional investors have their own restrictions on the company. Giving a chunk of holding to one institutional investor can be a plus and can be a minus too. A plus as in you get the entire money from one investor. You need not go to lakhs of investors with small time money, but at the same time this one single investor, since he holds a large chunk of your equity, can, to put it very roughly, bully you around, right? So that becomes a slightly handicapped position for the company. But these are also called value investors because these are sophisticated financial analysts who will also give you good advice, professional advice to carry your company on a long-term growth track. So that's the advantage of getting these kind of value-add investors on board, which can be mutual funds, institutions, private equity funds, which is again a very, very common source nowadays to raise money for the companies. Private equity funding, as we call it, which is neither public issue nor a QIP. It's another form of private placement. So in a QIP, what we are doing is we are approaching 30-40 investors on a competitive basis. We don't know who will apply and who will get the allotment in the end. In a private equity placement, we just approach one private equity fund and negotiate with them to take the entire capital, the entire issue that we are planning to launch. So if I need 50 crores for a project as a company, my options are either I launch a public issue, or I go to some investors and ask them to pay up, or I just approach one private equity fund and ask them to subscribe to the entire 50 crores, which is even more cost saving and time saving than the qualified institutional placement route. But again, your stakes are all with one private equity fund. So that is becoming a very, very common phenomenon nowadays to approach private equity funds. Lots of them have already set up shop in India, and obviously they're interested in high growth companies. Different kinds of PE funds, hedge funds, distress funds, venture capital funds, angel networks, depending on the stage of development of the company in which they're putting money, the kind of the objective for which the company is raising money. So depending on all that, you have different kinds of PE funds which are willing to put in money for financing a company's growth. These are some of the ways for domestic fundraising. When you go abroad to raise foreign currency, I mean, instead of rupees, if you need, let's say your project needs money in foreign currency, One approach is the traditional approach to go to a bank and get your loan, a foreign currency loan. The other option is you can go in for a GDR issue or an ADR issue, which is a global depository receipt issue, or a ADR, which is an American depository receipt. So when you make a issue of equity shares in a foreign market to a foreign investor and raise foreign currency from that route, that becomes a GDR issue. That's of equity again. Just like domestic debt, public issue, you also have an option to go to a foreign market to raise debt, either through a foreign currency convertible bond issue, which is called FCCB issue, or you can approach any of the international agencies like the World Bank, IFC and so on to give you a foreign currency loan. So this is broadly how companies like to raise money. Depending on the kind of project you have, the kind of money you want, the amount, the tenure, lots of factors which decide the right source of money for you. Obviously, if you need money for a short-term purpose, let's say for 1 year, 5 months, 6 months, to finance your working capital requirements, you will obviously not go to an equity issue. You'll probably raise it through a short-term source, say money markets. If you need it for a long period of time, depends on your debt equity ratio. If your debt is already very, very high, so that route is closed for you, you'll obviously go for equity. If the promoters have a majority holding in the company and they do not want to dilute the stake, they would not obviously like to issue fresh equity to anybody else. They would like to keep the entire equity in their own hands. So lots of these kind of factors dictate which source and what instrument the company might like to use to raise money. So it all has to be tailor-made to a company's requirements. There is no standard formula which fits all of them. So one has to go case to case and see how which is the best option for a company to raise money. So that's broad framework of the fundraising. Any questions now are most welcome from your end, if you'd like to ask anything. What was that? GDR, Arun? Okay. GDR, as I had mentioned, is a global depository receipt. Global depository receipt. That's called a GDR. It's an equity issue again. So just like the company issues equity shares in the market, and investors who subscribe to those equity shares obviously pay money to the company. So the fundraising is done through issue of equity shares in the domestic market, in the Indian market. So let's say if Reliance wants to raise money today in Indian rupees, they can approach the Indian capital markets. The investors will subscribe to those shares of Reliance and pay in Indian rupees, right? But suppose Reliance is executing a project in Europe for which it needs euros, does not need Indian rupees. So obviously the project cost is in euros, for which the payment has to be made in that currency. You need euros to finance your project. In that case, you can go to the French market or the German market or any of the European markets and launch your equity issue in that country and not in India. So what happens, suppose it's launched in France, the French community, the investor community will subscribe to that issue, and therefore your issue will get listed in the French stock exchange, the shares will get listed there, and you will raise money in euros. So it's advantageous to the company, as in you are able to raise foreign currency, you're able to approach another country, you get listed and visibility in another country. It's called a GDR because the route taken is through a depository. There is no direct issue to the French investor. The shares are issued to the depository in France, and that particular depository, which is a financial institution, will again issue receipts to the French investors, and that's why it's called GDR. The same issue if if it's made in USA, America, then it is called an ADR, American Depository Receipt. So just another name but basic concept is the same. And that's why you have these companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ. So ICICI, Reliance, all these companies which are listed in the US Stock Exchange have taken that route for listing. They have issued shares in those countries, in those markets, and got a listing in the stock exchange of that particular country. Is that clear?
Next question.
Okay. Dinesh, how do investors benefit from their investments? Do they charge interest or negotiate on part of the profit? Okay, so investors benefiting from the investments, that the returns you get from your investments will depend on what your investments are, correct? So if you've invested in bank, you've placed your money, surplus money in a bank in a fixed deposit, obviously you'll get your interest on the fixed deposit. If you've parked your money with a mutual fund, so depending on the kind of scheme that you put your money into, you'll either get a dividend or an interest, right? So let's remember one thing very clearly upfront. Any return on debt is interest, any return on equity is dividend. Broadly speaking, those are the two categories. So if you've invested in a debt instrument, you'll get a fixed rate of interest. If you've invested in equity shares of a company, you will get dividends. You might also get bonus shares, you might get rights issue, you might get some other forms of compensation from the company, but basically you will get dividends on equity shares. That will be your return on the investments, depending on the kind of investment that you have made. Okay, Rohit, these are different ways by which we can raise money. What are the different methods for the valuation of projects or companies? Okay, excellent. So you've gone into a very, very intricate area of finance, which is valuation. Valuation is a whole subject by itself in finance. A lot of factors go in it. So valuation of projects, when we say, is primarily the cost of the project, which means how much money are you estimating to spend on that project. So if I need to set up a project for a new product, let's say I want to manufacture a new product, so for one thing is I'll have to buy land for it, I'll have to spend money on the construction of the building, I'll have to erect some plant and machinery, I might need some working capital money on it, I may need 5-6 other things, right? So I will have to estimate, I will have to appoint valuers who will give me an estimate of how much money is going to be spent on each of those areas, and that will total up to be my cost of project, which can be like the valuation that you're talking about of the project. Valuation of companies is a different thing. A running company which is already into operation is again made up of a lot of assets, is already carrying a lot of assets with it in terms of its existing plant and machinery, existing land, existing employees that you have, goodwill, intangibles. So obviously the valuation of the company will be sum total of the value of the assets. Each of those category of assets will be valued, added up together. That's the value of the total assets. There are many other ways of doing it. DCF method, relative valuation method, lots of them. When we do finance course, hopefully we'll be able to cover those. Nishant, I would Professor Nitika be covering raising investment for entrepreneurs. Raising investment for entrepreneurs, raising money for entrepreneurs. Okay. Entrepreneurs would be like any other company, any other venture. So all the options which are open to a company are also open to an entrepreneur. The only difference would be that it's on a smaller scale. A company has already established the credibility, but an entrepreneur, being a first time venture, may not have all the routes open to it as they would be open to a company. So as an entrepreneur, I may have some options of equity open to me. I may be able to access some debt from a bank or some other institution. I may not be able to access the capital markets straight away, because that's the route which is open to a company and not to a entrepreneurship, which is in the form of a partnership or a sole proprietorship. So unless you are a limited company, you will not be eligible to approach the capital markets. Secondly, since you are an entrepreneur, the credibility is still to be established in the markets, and the private equity funds, mutual funds normally like to invest in big time companies, and therefore the route which is open mostly to entrepreneurs is the angel funding network that we call. That's a smaller version of a private equity fund, is an angel fund as we call it. Sometimes they are open to giving money against equity to an entrepreneur. Okay, Shrikant Ji, what is the mechanism of ECB, its impact on balance sheet when it matures? Perhaps we take up questions later. Well, ECB is an external commercial borrowing. It's like I said, it's just like it's like the counterpart of a domestic debt that you have. So if you're raising debt, borrowings from the domestic market, it's called a loan, a domestic loan. If you're raising similar borrowings from an external market, a foreign country in a foreign currency, that becomes external commercial borrowing. And impact on the balance sheet is same as that of any other debt. It appears as loans, as borrowings, as liabilities on your balance sheet. The difference could be that because it's in foreign currency, to that extent the foreign currency risk will be there. The fluctuations on the foreign currency vis-a-vis the Indian rupee may have to be taken into account. So if there is a loss on account of that, then you might have to account for that in your balance sheet. So that is the difference vis-a-vis the domestic loan that you might face there. What are venture capital funds? Okay, venture capital funds actually is, if you read the textbook definition, as the name goes, which venture into unknown areas. So they are high risk, high return kind of funds as we call it. They assume higher risk than the normal funds. So if let's say it's a new technology, an untried technology, or somebody trying to venture into a new product which has not yet been established, a new market, a new geographical terrain, a new promoter who doesn't have a past track record, obviously these are more risky projects. A normal private equity fund or a normal investor may not be very happy putting their money into these kind of funds. So therefore you have venture capital funds who are willing to take that extra risk because of the newness of the project or the promoter or the other aspects of the project. So the venture capital fund, their charter, their incorporation, their objective is such that they're willing to take on more risk and finance these kind of projects. Obviously higher the risk, higher the returns. So in anticipation of higher returns, they are willing to do that. So it's just like any other private equity fund. It's a form of private equity fund which is more adventurous in their objectives of investing, obviously in return for higher compensation. Yeah. Dhananjay, in reference to raising finance where there is a cap and FDI, for example, retail, what are various instruments company can employ and benefits? Where there's a cap on FDI, okay. On FDI, for example, retail, retail FDI, what are the various instruments company can employ? And same thing. I don't think there's a difference. See, the cap on FDI is only in terms of the ownership. So what is restricted as per the government policy is how much money the foreign investor or the promoter can put into that sector, into that company. So if RBI says you cannot put more than 49% into a venture, which means the balance 51% has to come from the Indian equity. which could be the Indian promoter, can be the Indian investor, can be anybody else. So the cap is in terms of the overall shareholding pattern of how much the foreign investor can control in that company vis-a-vis the domestic owner. The routes and the options remain the same, subject to your complying with those RBI guidelines and the caps. Yeah. Rohit, what is the most used valuation method in companies? DCF. If possible, you can explain about triangulation while doing valuation. I don't want to get very technical here because of the shortage of time, but yes, okay. So DCF method is basically your discounted cash flow method, which is the most popular and the most common method of valuation. So what we do here is we try to find out the intrinsic value of the security or the company for whom we are trying to find out the value. How do we find the intrinsic value? By finding out the cash flows that you expect from that company or that project in future and discounting that with the discount rate to present and adding up the total present values. That is basically your discounted cash flow method. There is relative valuation method also, which does not talk about cash flows. It talks about peer comparison valuation in terms of the other competitors, other players, other companies in the market, in the industry. So there are different approaches to doing valuation. How companies decide on the price band for IPO, how allotment is done. Okay, so price band is basically now allowed by SEBI. What they say is you can instead of fixing up one price for your IPO or your public issue, so say I want to say 50 rupees is the price per share at which I want to launch my public issue, but I'm not sure, maybe I can get 52 rupees, 55 rupees also. So in that case I will go for a price band, which means I can specify my issue will be, let's say, 50 to 55 rupees. So the SEBI allows a 20% band, 20% of the floor price can be issued as a band, as a price band. So I can say my issue will be priced anywhere between 50 rupees and 55 rupees. And then based on the demand and the subscriptions from the market, as we call a book building process, which is like a auction process, which means the investors will bid at what price they're willing to take up how many shares. So the auction process happens there, which is called a book building process. Based on that, the company knows at what price they will be able to sell off the entire lot of shares that they want to do. And finally they may decide 52 rupees, 53 rupees as the cutoff price, or a 54 rupees, whatever is the entire demand from the market. Based on that, they will decide a cutoff price, and the entire issue will be then done at that cutoff price. And allotment, of course, is again based on SEBI guidelines. SEBI has some guidelines on allotment, which says proportionate allotment is what they call. So if there is subscription from the market which is in excess of how much the company wants to allot, so suppose I want to allot 1 crore shares and I get subscription from the market for 5 crore shares, my issue is oversubscribed 5 times. Then in that case, different categories of investors are put. So like retail investors will be one category, high net worth individual will be another category, institutional investors will be a third category. So I'll make categories based on the different types of investors, and in each category I will do proportionate allotment. So basis of allotment is decided by the company in consultation with the lead manager and the registrar. It is approved by the stock exchange and by SEBI, and then finally on that basis the allotment is done to the investors. How to protect your ownership as business owner when one is going for raising money for business through capital markets. Yeah, so like I said, this is one of the very, very critical factors, especially in the Indian market, because the Indian promoters are quite particular about the kind of control they have on their companies. So if the promoter is very keen that his holding control should not go below a certain percentage in the company. So suppose he's holding, let's say, 60% of the company today. If he issues new shares to outsiders, obviously his control gets diluted from 60% to say 50%, 40%, whatever, depending on the amount of issue. So if he's keen on doing that, then one option is he does not go for an equity issue. He wants more money. He should not go the equity route. He should look at some other route, let's say debt issue or some other kind of hybrid instruments which avoid an equity route. That's one. Second can be he also subscribes to 60% of the new issue. So he is holding 60% currently. If he puts in money 60% in the new issue also, obviously his control and stake remains at 60%, does not get diluted. Then there are other ways of doing it. He can issue bonus shares to himself, he can issue rights shares, he can issue some warrants to himself which can get converted to equity shares. So, but then everything has to be approved by the shareholders, has to be as per the Companies Act. So you cannot do anything which is not in accordance with the provisions of the Companies Act or in provisions of the SEBI guidelines. So one has to be careful about not violating those guidelines. Within that framework, you can obviously manage to keep your control at the level which you want to. What is risk analysis? Okay, risk analysis actually is, as the name goes, trying to analyze the level of risk which is there in a project or in a company or in a security or an investment, whatever you're trying to put your money into. So if you're an investor, you'd like to put your money into investment and you want to assess how much risk is that investment going to be holding for you. So if you're investing, let's say, in a government bond or a government security, the risk is much lower. If you invest in a bank, FD, risk is again low, but not as low as government securities, because banks obviously are rated at slightly below the government. If you go to a company and invest your money there, risk is much higher. It's a AAA rated company, well and good. If it's a BB, C, D, as the rating goes down, your default risk goes high and high. So obviously you're assuming high and high risk there. If you go for equity shares, your risk is even much higher, because that's the last in the order of priority for payment for the company, carries a huge amount of risk. You go to junk bonds, the risk is much higher. So the risk analysis is basically trying to assess the kind of risk that you are going to assume when you invest in a particular instrument or a security. From the company's perspective, risk analysis would mean trying to assess the amount of risk they have in a project. So when you're going to invest money as a company into a project or into buying of another company, what's the kind of risk that you are taking? And there are various techniques to do it, to incorporate risk into the project. You have sensitivity analysis, you have CEC methods, a lot of methods are taken, are there to assess the kind of risk that a company or an investor would assume into an investment. Akshay, how and when does a hostile takeover take place? Okay, that's interesting. Hostile takeover. So, for those who are not very aware of that term, takeover is what we say when a company buys another company, and so if the other company is willing to sell off happily to this buyer, it's a friendly takeover. But if the other company resists, does not want to be taken over by this X company, the first company, then it's called a hostile takeover. Does not happen very often in India, because the SEBI rules and the stock exchange rules are very, very strict, which means a lot of disclosures are there at every point of time, which means you cannot do much about this. But yes, globally it is a very, very common phenomena. Happens mainly when a company is a very, very vulnerable target, a soft target to be taken over by another company, which means that either it is carrying too valuable assets, carrying cash, or has a weaker management, in which case it becomes an attractive target to be taken over by another company. And if the company does not want to sell off to the buyer company, resists being taken over, then it becomes a hostile takeover. So we've had many cases in the past when a hostile takeover happens. Even the Cadbury deal was hostile. Your Lakshmi Mittal deal, Arcelor deal, was also hostile to that extent, where Arcelor resisted being taken over by Lakshmi Mittal. So those were some cases, but then it does happen ultimately. And if the synergies work to the advantage of the buyer company, and the seller company is in a weaker position, is not able to defend itself through various strategies, there are various defense strategies available to avoid a hostile takeover. But if they don't work, and if the buyer is in a stronger position, then that's how a hostile takeover will happen. What happens to the shares if I do not hand over back them when the company is buying back? So nothing happens, fine, you should be happy with your shares, because a company can offer to buy back the shares from the investors, from the shareholders who want to sell it back to the company. So if you think you want to sell it back to the company, you can go for the buyback program, subscription to the buyback program. If you do not want to sell, there is no compulsion on you to sell it off. You can continue to retain those shares. Companies normally like to buy back shares. It's as a form of compensation to the investors. So when they believe that the share is priced very low in the market, if the management has a lot of confidence in their own shares, and they believe that the market is not pricing the shares properly, in which case the company would like to buy back its own shares from the market. It's a signal to the investors that the company has a lot of confidence in the price of the shares, and also it's an opportunity for the company to utilize the surplus funds that they have available with themselves. So if they're carrying surplus money and they have no projects to invest into, might as well invest into your own shares. And there's a limit, 25% of the net worth of the company can be bought back in a single year. So obviously the 75% is still there, which is not being sold off. What is the purpose of treasury stocks? Any relation? Yes. With the share bought back? Yes. Treasury stocks are mostly the stocks which the company is keeping for buying and selling purposes. So that's called a treasury. Bought back stock in India have to be extinguished as per the laws. So in India you cannot carry your own shares as treasury stock. Abroad, yes, you can do that. So most of the times you notice the foreign companies in their balance sheets carrying the treasury stock, which means that when they bought back their own shares, they carry it for some time and they can use those shares for reissuing to another class of investors or for some other purpose. But they can't do that here. In India, they're supposed to extinguish and sell and physically destroy those shares. They cannot reissue those shares. How to go for government fundings and subsidies? Okay, so government fundings and subsidies, actually government normally would give you money and subsidies only if it is a project or a company which is in line with their sector which they want to promote. So let's say if government wants to promote the infrastructure companies, infrastructure sector, in which case they will offer incentives to companies to set up in the infrastructure sector, and they might give subsidies. So if company, let's say government wants to promote agriculture, wants to promote setting up industries in the rural areas or in the backward areas, then in that case they might give you subsidies. Or if you're trying to produce a product which the country is in need of, or there's a dearth of production of that product in India, then again government would subsidize you for that. So those are some areas which are high on the priority list of the government to be promoted. Those are the ones which government will back up in terms of funding. What are the resources to get to know more about various government fundings and subsidies? Well, I think you can go to the website. You can Google it out. The different the websites of the government, Department of Commerce, Department of Finance. You have the export policy of the government. So certain export projects are funded, subsidized by the government. So you can just go to those websites of the government and get your information. Any other questions? Okay, so if there are no specific questions, no, you didn't interrupt me. That's fine. In fact, I enjoy more the interactive sessions that we have, the question answer sessions that we have, rather than making it a monologue on my side. So if there are more questions, most welcome to do that. I gave you a broad framework of how companies normally raise money, the project funding, and the different markets we can go to. If there's any specific area that you want to know more about, you're most welcome to do that. Nishant, angel investors as it is a new concept. That's a purchase of another. Okay. Angel investors, yes, angel investor network you might have heard of. It's a fund. It's a fund created by a few high net worth individuals. Let's say 10 to 20 people who would come together. Each one would put in about 5 crores, 10 crores, make a fund about 50-60 crores, and the idea is to provide funding to small entrepreneurs and small companies which are still not very large companies. So funding amount is small, so maybe they'll give you 10 crores, 12 crores in one shot, which a private equity fund may not be interested in giving you, or 5 crores or 2 crores. So what that range, which a private equity fund normally likes to give higher volume of money. They do not get into smaller deals. So when a smaller company needs a small amount of money in angel network, that's called an angel fund as it is, and it's more for newer companies and small time companies rather than more, and not so much for the established and bigger companies. When a company has taken a loan to finance a purchase of another company, what are the risks it assumes to pay it back? Okay, that's interesting again. This is called something like a leveraged buyout that we call. You might have heard of that term, LBO as we call it, leveraged buyout, which means when you are buying another company, you need money to pay that company, which is a seller company, would obviously sell it to you for money, and you raise the money that you need to pay that other company through debt. So let's say you borrow from a bank 100 crores to buy another company and pay them 100 crores. So this is called a leveraged buyout, when a transaction, an acquisition transaction, is financed primarily from debt or borrowings. There is some many, obviously there is some more to the lender, because the entire transaction is heavily leveraged, is a lot amount of debt. The repayment will depend upon the performance of the selling company, the company that you have just acquired. So the repayment of the loan, the interest, the principal amount will all get paid back from the cash flows that you generate from this company that you have just bought. And the security to the lender would be the assets of the seller company. So those assets are pledged as security to the lender, against which he will give you a loan to buy out that company, and the servicing would happen from there on. So the risk, I would say, to the lender, of course, is a very, very calculated risk, just like any other project he invests into. So he will obviously see that this company which is being financed is will generate enough cash flows to be able to repay back their loans. But since the transaction is heavily leveraged, very little amount of equity there, too much of debt, to that extent, yes, the risk is much higher.
What's the second part of the question?
And what steps can it take to pay back the loan apart from its own cash? No, not own cash flows. Like I said, the repayment happens from the cash flows of the company which you have purchased, not your cash flows. So please remember, the bank has given you money, or the lender has provided you money to buy out this other company, which is like an asset to you. So the servicing of that loan has to come from the company, the cash flows of the company that you have purchased. What steps can it take to pay back the loan? So that is primarily what it is, and the security, like I said, is the assets. And sometimes the lender obviously will take the guarantee, corporate guarantee of the buyer company also. So if Tatas have bought out Tetley, or they buy out any other company, then the Tata guarantee is there. Other than Tetley's cash flows being used to service the lending, then Tata's own corporate guarantee is there in case there is a problem in the paying back of the debt. So the lender is quite safe in these transactions. I bought IDFC infrastructure bonds. Is my money safe? Where am I? On the payback priority list. Very high. You would be very high on the payback priority list. Don't worry. Yes, your money is safe. IDFC is a well-rated company, and infrastructure sector is doing well. So the bonds were rated quite well. They were tax-free bonds, if I am correct. So you get your tax benefit, your tax saving also on those bonds, on that investments. So when we invest in bonds, what we primarily look at is the rating. My advice to you is, whenever you are investing in any kinds of bonds, in fact it's much easier, the decision to invest in a bond is much easier than investing in equity, because bonds are rated by credit rating agencies. So your CARE, CRISIL, ICRA, all these people are there who will rate the bonds, which means a rating is a assessment of the capacity of the company to service and to pay back the bond money, the interest and the principal on the bonds. So if it's a AAA rated bond, your money is completely safe. AA plus, AA, B, C. So as the rating goes down, the default risk goes on increasing, and then your money is not safe. If you're investing in a C graded bond or a B grade bond, then obviously the money is not safe. But if you invested in AAA rated bond, then of course the money is very, very safe. Do companies change articles of association whenever there is new funds, equity or debt? Normally, your initial memorandum and articles of association, which are the original documents of incorporation for a company, are registered with ROC, the Registrar of Companies, and that provides for an authorized capital, which is very, very huge amount. And every time you need to raise some money, you don't need to change that. So your authorized capital initially itself is such a large amount which you filed with ROC, that every time you raise money, you don't need to go back to ROC to have it changed, because that will become very, very tedious process. So what companies do it, suppose I'm a 100 crore company, initially itself I'll file my authorized capital as 800 crores or 1000 crores, which means obviously I'm not going to raise 1000 crore in one go. I may just go for 50 crores at some time, 80 crore another time, 200 crore another time. So which leaves me with sufficient flexibility and margin to raise money as and when I need it many times. Every time I don't need to go back and change it. The only thing I need to do is I need to take my shareholders' permission. So I need to get the resolution cleared from the shareholders in the AGM or the EGM, and of course the board decides it first. The board makes the resolution, shareholders clear it, and then SEBI clearance and all, and the rest of the formalities go.
Next question.
What happens to my holding when company delist itself? Delisting is a very, very rare phenomena in India. Stock exchange has their rules on delisting. So delisting can be either voluntary or it can be out of compulsion, legal compulsion, which means if you have violated any of the laws or any of the listing guidelines, the stock exchange will delist you. Sometimes the promoters might want to do it voluntarily because they just want to convert their company to a private company and they do not want to remain public anymore. So that can be voluntary, and in that case the stock exchange has their guidelines to compensate the investors, because all our rules in the country, whether it is SEBI or stock exchange, are around the basic logic that the minority shareholders should not get hurt or should not face any financial loss. So in that case the shareholders are compensated, their shares are purchased back by the company at the going market price at no loss to them.
Next question.
Can you elaborate on the CDS, credit default swaps, that played a major role in the 2000 financial crisis? Okay, credit default swaps, actually this is a securitized instrument which was mostly done against housing loans in the US market 2005 onwards primarily. So what was happening was a certain house against which a loan has been given by the bank X, let's say. Instead of holding that loan to its maturity, that could be 10 years, what the bank did was X bank sold it to Y bank, the loan. So once the loan gets sold to Y bank, now Y becomes the lender and X gets the cash on the loan. They're able to liquidate the loan, and so now the position is held by Y. What happens is then Y can also sell it off to Z, Z can sell it off to A, B, C, any other, right? So that process goes on, and the securitization therefore was into several layers into the economy, and most of these are also guaranteed or also rated by the agencies. They are underwritten. So if it's a swap instrument, what you're talking about, CDS, credit default swaps, which means that I exchange one set of loan for another set of loan, and that's a swap transaction, and another company will guarantee payment on this or insure this. So it's like an insurance transaction on the swap, right? So if there is a default on this loan by the borrower, the guy who borrowed, whose house it was initially, and he borrowed, and there's a default, so then all these layers get affected. So the guy who is lent out money, the person to whom he is sold out to, the person who has insured it. So, and just imagine happening in billions and billions of dollars can just bring down the whole economy. So that was a primary reason for the recession and the crisis, that loans were given against against borrowers who did not have a very good credit rating, whose rating was very, very much in doubt. In their zest and eagerness to give loans, banks had given those loans out to even bad quality borrowers. The loan amount given was much more than the value of the asset. So if the house was costing let's say about $1 million, the loan amount would have been 1 million plus something, which means you are even giving money over and above the value of the asset. If the value of the asset comes down, which is what happened in the US market, the housing market crashed. So the value of the houses came down substantially. The loans were much more than that, and so therefore the entire loans went bad, and the banks went into crisis, the insurance companies went into crisis, and that's how the whole recession happened there. Can my company manage rating agency or investment bank? Maybe for a better rating or better price band. Well, I would say it is not in your interest, in the interest of the company, to manage to do that. One, it is not possible with a rating agency, because rating agencies are credible institutions. So while they get their money, they feast from you as a client who is getting the rating done. But at the same time, these are agencies like CARE, CRISIL, ICRA, who are credible institutions in whom there is funding by SBI, IDBI, the government agencies. So there's a credibility attached to it. Number two, and more important, these rating agencies, more than being answerable to you as a client, are answerable to SEBI, Securities Exchange Board of India, which is the regulatory authority on the capital markets. So one small lapse or one small hand holding someplace can land them into serious problems. It can land to their it can amount to their license being cancelled, their business being out. So obviously nobody wants to take that risk for one client, and reputation is what is most important in the financial services industry for an investment bank or for a rating agency, and therefore one does not like to put that into stake for short-term gains. If I want to start a company, where should I start with? Please give the steps till establishment. You want to start a company, you'll have to first decide are you really wanting to start a company, or you want to start a proprietorship, a partnership, a limited company, what form of organization you want to start with. So if it is a limited company, obviously the governing law is the Companies Act. So you might like to just go through those provisions. They provide for private limited company or a public limited company, which depending on what organization you want. The minimum capital is there, the minimum number of members who should be your shareholders, your directors, and the formalities are all mentioned there. So that is what you'll have to do. You'll have to register yourself. You'll have to make a memorandum, articles, file it with ROC, Registrar of Companies. They'll give you a certificate of incorporation, and then a certificate of commencement will follow, and that is what will entitle you to start your company. That's it. Okay. Thank you so much for being here with us. It was a very enjoyable session, and look forward to more such interactions with you all. Bye. Good night.